Hello, friends. Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. I'm your host, Sarah Bueno, and I am so happy you joined us today. Generally, seriously, totally happy to have you here. I was just thinking the other day how much I really enjoy having these conversations, and there would be no better way to have them than to have a podcast. I just feel so blessed. And the fact that you listen and enjoy them is like icing on this delicious cake. What's your favorite cake? I've actually been into eating icing lately. Shh, don't tell anybody. It's so much sugar. Anyway, let's stop talking about cake. Clearly, I need to eat something. But let me tell you a couple things before I get to today's guest. So if you want to connect with me, let's hang out on Instagram at Head Heart Therapy. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcast if you so desire. 5 stars, please. Pretty please. I'm guessing if you're here that's what you would want to give. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you what to do. And then finally, if you want to give financially, you can find us on Patreon under Conversations with a Wounded Healer. And you can donate as little as $1 a month. And I'm going to send you a super fun welcome gift if you do that. So now on to today's interview. I do want to note also, we had some technical issues with the audio on this one. So there's going to be a point in time where I kind of pop in and give you a synopsis of what it is that Shiralee was saying that didn't unfortunately get captured. And there are a couple places where we had to kind of edit out, but it's still a wonderful interview. Shiralee is an incredible human being that I am so excited to share with you. So let me tell you about Shiralee. She is a physical therapist who works with both adults and children, specializing in craniosacral therapy and visceral mobilization. She is passionate about utilizing a holistic approach to determining the underlying factors that cause dysfunction and imbalance. So please enjoy my interview with Shiralee. Hello, Shiralee. Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
We're popping your podcast cherry today, aren't we?
You are. I've never actually been on a podcast. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I've never, talked to anybody in this way. So
So let's begin. We can tell people how I know you. You're my physical therapist.
Yes, I am.
And I literally just saw you this morning.
Yeah.
So we already got to talk already, but we're going to tell people all the things about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a physical therapist by trade. I graduated from PT school. It's been 8 years. Wow. And I wouldn't call myself a traditional physical therapist. I do practice in an outpatient setting, but I guess I would say skilled in, or my niche is craniosacral therapy and visceral mobilization. So since PT school, I've taken a lot of continuing education courses. And I would say a bulk of what I do now is rooted in that. And so I love what I do, but a little bit about craniosacral therapy and a little bit about visceral mobilization. They're hands-on techniques and a lot of light touch. And when you come in and you see me work, it's going to look like, just manipulations, some gentle manipulations, but there's kind of a lot more to it. It's a feeling art. It's learning to really feel what's going on in the body, because the body, it's talking to us on so many levels. And I think that if you pause and listen and just kind of be in its presence, it tells you a lot more. You get into that craniosacral system and you feel that rhythm, and you use that to, again, sort of talk to the body and use light adjustments and light touches to really, affect a person or help support a person and support overall health, really.
To make it more concrete for folks, which might be helpful, you can talk specifically about my case and what we do together. Like the things that you said today, like you were asking me questions that I was like, oh shit, how'd you know that I was eating like cheesy, buttery foods right now? So if you want to share a little snapshot of that, I'm totally cool with it.
Okay. So today I was, talking about craniosacral therapy, but I also utilize visceral mobilization, which is basically learning how to palpate or touch and feel where organs are in the body, and then sort of work with them and get them moving, because we hear this a lot, mobility is health. And, that means exercise and moving and getting up and making sure that you are doing all of those things. But at the same time, it's also our internal organs as well, right? Like they also need to be moving. And so today I was talking to Sarah about how when I was working on her liver specifically, it felt a little sluggish. And our liver literally filters everything. It filters our blood, it filters any sort of substance that we put on our body, any sort of medication or anything we digest internally, our food, and also emotions. And it felt a little heavy. And now this is something that you feel, right? It's after having the experience of working with the various organs, you start to have a feel, and each thing that comes into contact with an organ feels a little different. And so today I was telling Sarah that when she started talking about something that sort of felt like it had an impact on the organ, you could feel how that impact was translating. And it was you're kind of having, again, a conversation with the body, just with touch and feel. And so with working with that, we want our organs and we want everything to have that sort of mobility, because again, mobility is health. And so that's sort of a snapshot of what I was working on with Sarah. But just to give you an idea with clients in general, I'm looking at the body, I'm looking at movement patterns externally and also internally. And so some of that is really tangible in how I watch you walk, right? How I assess alignment. A lot of those things you can sort of tell on a person just by how they're moving. But a lot of things go into actually putting your hands on somebody and feeling how the tissue is sliding in my hands, or how it's not sliding in my hands, or how it might feel more inflamed or pouchy in one place versus another. And the idea is we want these things to be moving and moving together, right? And so that's kind of my job. Is someone comes in and they'll say, hey, I have pain, or I'm moving differently, or this doesn't seem right. And what I love to do is to go in and, recognize that it might be one part that's off or that's not quite connected, but how is that part affected by or affecting another part of your body, and, getting things to work together.
And one thing that's really interesting about your work, I've had a lot of energy healing, and I used to see this woman, Sarah Wolfman, to do somatic touch therapy, and she was basically doing something very similar. And I was so excited to know that, like, this is a thing that's accepted by medicine, right? Like, Western medicine is saying that visceral manipulation is a thing, when really, truly, it feels like energy work. So I don't know if you can talk about like your understanding of the connections between those two worlds.
I think it's hard for people to realize that everything is sort of connected, down to how you feel, what you put in your body, what you're consuming in terms of what you're listening to and what you're watching. And all those things are so connected. Nothing is just a product of or affecting just one thing. And I think that that's something that's, in my opinion, missing, is that we are an integrated person, an integrated system that's part of an integrated cosmos, if you will. And I think because we don't have that sort of concept, it's hard for people to understand that something, that could feel sort of like energy work. I mean, everything is energy, can actually make a change, So I think that's what's tough for people, is like, this is bothering me, so I'll take a pill and it'll make me feel better. And while that's totally valid and it's totally okay, I think, there's X, Y, or Z that maybe got you there. And if we can sort of realize how X, Y, and Z work together in the past to bring you to where you are in your current, if we sort of take account for that, how we're moving, how we're sleeping, how we're eating, and how all those things work together, I think that we have like a better integration of being, and of health. And I think that it's really two ways of looking at things.
Well, I mean, this whole integration between mind body, like the problem in Western medicine is that mind and body were separated at some point when they never should have been. And like you said, everything is energy. And so literally everything is energy medicine, if we think about it in that way, right? Like even Western medicine, even taking a pill, like you are ingesting something that's energy from something else.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And I think in terms of what you're saying, where you actually feel it, I think for us, it's almost like surprising that something that doesn't seem so invasive could be so full of feeling just in the moment. So I think, to your point, I guess it does feel like energy, but also, again, to your point, you said that you take a pill and that's also energy that you're ingesting. What I've been realizing recently is that our mindset has to sort of shift to, and to know that this is real. Like when I touch you, when I touch you, when I talk to you, it has an effect on you because it's all energy, right? And so I could take a pill. I can also be talked to in a certain way, positive or negative, and it's all going to have an effect on me. And kind of taking account for that and being responsible for that is, I think, really important. And I think it's health. And that's kind of where I come in, where, I start with the touch, but also like we were kind of dialoguing and talking about today, there's, X, Y, and Z that maybe brought you to where you're sort of feeling the way you do today, or where you're sort of not moving or connecting or integrating in the way that you want to, or in the way you want to feel, and honing in on that, helping with identifying those factors, but also supporting them.
Well, and just to get specific again about my case to help people understand, I saw you several years ago and then came to see you again this time around because I was nauseous all the time. I was having pretty serious back pain and I was nauseous, and I was going to the chiropractor and my acupuncturist, and they couldn't move what needed to be moved for a significant period of time. And then someone suggested, go back to Shiralee. And what you told me, which was so interesting, and the podcast listeners know I went to treatment. So I was processing a lot of trauma when I went through that treatment program, and I have been for several years. And you were like, oh yeah, anger lives in the liver. And that's it's processed in the liver. And that's one of the things I've really been working with is allowing myself to feel angry. And so just in one session with you, you were like, oh yeah, let's kind of shift this a little bit. And then I wasn't experiencing that nausea and that back pain again. And what you said to me that was so important was like, you said you've done the emotional work and you've now manifested that into your physical body, and we just have to move it out of your physical body now.
Yeah. Yes. And sort of help you process that, because again, you could be doing awesome work with therapy, awesome work by yourself, and yet you could still not feel right. And I think, that part of someone actually touching you and connecting with, be it an organ or, your nervous system, you're really helping to actually put your hands on something and support you. And I think I know it, I've, seen it many times. It really pushes people to the next level. You bring up a great point where you said, I did the work and, it manifested as this. And I wish it were always that easy, where in one session we could just, sort of nip things in the bud, but it's not always that easy. But to your point, and to kind of what we've been talking about, it's all energy and it all works together. And so that's another part of what I love to do is I love working with therapists, or I love working with occupational therapists, speech therapists, and kind of collaborate on working on the body. Because when have a team, or acupuncturists, right? Chiropractors, when you have a team and you're talking to each other, you're talking to each other about a person, but you're also communicating with their body in different ways, and that you're truly connecting on different levels with the person. And I think it makes so much sense, number one. But number two, I don't think that enough people are seen that way and are connected with in that way. And it really makes all the difference. It just feels kind of like a lonely time because of COVID, but just in general, it feels like everything is so separate and, is always attacked in parts, where it's like, can we just work together and, and see people on multiple levels? And that's the most fun, I think, in my work.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about you. How did you get here? How did you decide to go to PT school? And then how did you get into this specific specialization?
I'm a dancer, and I was on the dance team, and I injured myself, and I actually had to go to PT to rehab my knee. And I remember being in my session and thinking, wow, this is so cool. Like you get to see your patient, and you get to see your patient at least once a week, and you get to see that growth or that development, that change. And it was satisfying for me to see that. And I got to really get to know my therapist and connect with her. And I was like, there's something to this, and so I sort of jumped into it, and I said, well, I'm already taking the prereqs. I want to be helping people. I want to connect with people this way. And this just seems kind of right. And I changed my major, and I changed my course a little bit, and I applied to PT school like a semester later. And I got in the year and I went, and it was the best 3 years of my life. I always say I went to school down in Florida. I loved my classmates, and that's where for the maybe first or second time in my life, I'm like, wow, I really belong here. I found that with dance. I'm like, wow, I belong in like the dance realm. And then I got to PT school and I'm like, I really belong here amongst people that are like me and like to do the same things as me. And that was amazing. And then I had an outpatient rotation my last year of PT school.
So, as I promised at the beginning of the episode, this is a place where we had a little bit of a technical issue. So, let me summarize what Shiralee said here. So, she really was talking about her first outpatient clinical placement and the clinical instructor who inspired her on the path that she's on today. Her placement was in California, and her instructor and the clinic there worked with a lot of patients with consuming chronic pain. And it was a really unique experience. Now back to Shiralee.
And I hadn't met people like that, for better or worse, or maybe just living in sort of a sheltered life, or maybe even amongst more healthy people. But I remember him working with them, and he'd have his hands on them and, be manipulating them and talking to them. And his patients would leave and they would be smiling, and they would come back a few sessions or a few weeks later, and they would be different, and they would be just better. You could tell, from head to toe, from their demeanor to the way they were walking, to the way they were conversing with people, they were just different, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he, at that time, started showing me some hands-on techniques, really simple. And I remember him taking my hands and putting them on one of his patients, and then putting his hands over my hands and saying, I'm just working on this tissue, sort of releasing here, and I feel this. What do you feel? And I remember telling him, oh, this feels sort of, I know it was really, I'm like, this feels sort of hollow, like there's not a lot of movement. And he's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
You get it already.
That's
Wow.
Yeah. And it was sort of, it was nice. And it was also kind of like mind blowing, because I didn't really know what I was doing. But even at that time, I knew there was something to it, and I knew I was where I was supposed to be. And that was, again, like the third time in my life that I had felt that way. And so, after that, I followed him around and, kind of learned from him here or there. And I remember telling him, I don't really know what you're doing. I'm just going to learn everything I can. And I know myself, 3-4 years down the line, things that you did today will make sense to me. And that's really kind of what happened, because after that, I started taking the courses. After I graduated, then I started taking the courses that he did. And I just got connected with more people. And, kind of just took off, and it took on a life of itself. So, I'm here as a product of a lot of things, and a lot of things that went right in my life, and almost like a personal intuition of hopping around and being where I'm supposed to be. So he really inspired me, and the classes and the courses continue to inspire me, and the people that I've met along the way continue to inspire me. And so, sometimes I sit here and I'm like, how did I get here? It all sort of worked out.
Yeah. Well, something else that you and I have talked about in our sessions is, the pressure of growing up in an Indian family and having things that were expected of you. And I'm curious if you want to talk a little bit about that, and how you've been able to like arrive at this place for yourself amidst that pressure and that expectation.
Yeah, no, definitely. The funniest call that I got was my first semester of PT school. My dad calls me up and he's like, so how's PT school? And I said, well, it's not hard. I really like it. It's just a lot of work. And he's like, okay. It's like, are you sure you don't want to go to med school? Like, you're sure you don't want to go to med school? He's like, you don't want to? And I'm like, well, no, Dad, I'm a semester in and I just don't want to go to med school. And he's like, okay, I thought if one of you three, I have a brother and a sister, and if I thought if one of you three was going to go, it'd be you. But okay, well, that's all right. I'm glad you're, And so to your point, I think there was a lot of pressure to kind of do what kind of makes sense, what's logical, what you can see in front of you, and kind of knock out, and what's tangible. And I never could do that. I'm just not that person. As hard as I might have tried when I was younger, I couldn't do that. And when I'm happy and I'm doing what I love to do, and it also makes sense, I think I've sort of gotten, I don't want to say gotten away from that, but I've definitely grown through that, because I don't think that I'd be where I was if I wasn't questioned, and if I didn't in turn question myself. Yeah, I think I don't want to say that pressure is the way to grow, because I don't necessarily always believe that. But I think that for me as a person, it's definitely made me question a lot and really, I'm truly evolve, in a way that I find fulfilling. So yeah. And they also like to be treated, Yeah, exactly. So they don't get it, but they like it and they feel better. So
And what I hear you describing is that there sounds like an unconditional love in your family, that even though you have taken a path that wasn't necessarily the path that they intended for you to take, the love that they really have for you can transcend that expectation. Whereas I feel like I kind of got the opposite. It was just like, oh yeah, do what you want with your life. But then the emotional feeling I got was that I was doing it wrong, even though there was no particular thing I was supposed to be doing.
yeah. Yeah. God, that's so true. That is really true. And I guess I'm really grateful for that too.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of contention, but we're fiery people in my family. And, I got it from somewhere. I did. So I think you're absolutely right. Like in the end, like at the end of the day, they'll always be in my corner, like rooting for me no matter what. They won't always understand it. And, there'll be fights and questioning, but it never over like the love, I guess, which is kind of beautiful, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Do you consider yourself a healer?
do I consider myself a healer? Oh God, I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know if I would use the word healer, but I guess more of an observer. Yeah. I think that life is, there's a lot of things that are happening, and there always was and there always will be. But I think that life is so, so beautiful, and there's so much going on at all times. I mean, when you look at the world, there's so much energy, there's so much complexity. I sort of live to understand it. It's kind of moving, and I think in this work, when I get to connect with a person and I get to connect with their bodies, it's like I get to observe and connect with like a microcosm of that, a pocket of that. And so I don't know, I wouldn't consider myself a healer as much as I would an observer and someone who just wants to connect. So yeah, that's what I would say. I guess I haven't really fully understood what healer means yet. Maybe at some point, if I dive into that, maybe, but no, I would say I'm more of like a supporter and a connector.
Yeah. I think the term healer, what I've learned from asking this question, hundreds of times now is that everybody defines it a little bit differently. And that's what's important about the question is how you hold it and all of the experiences that you've had, what that means to you.
You're absolutely right. Right. When I was answering, I'm like, yeah, I guess I don't really know what that means, but I very much believe in a higher power. And I feel that each and every person in each and everything has that higher power in it. And that's the cosm, that's the microcosm. And I think that I observe and I see that that's the healer in each and everything. And so if I observe that and connect with it, I mean, yeah, I guess that's just how I'm feeling it. When I get to observe that and when I get to connect with that I feel like I'm connecting with the world. And so observing that healing is where I'm sort of at. So I guess that healing happens and we see it and we connect with it. And that higher spirit is the true healer for me.
What religion were you raised with?
I guess we would call ourselves Hindu. My stepmom was Christian, and so we had that, but I guess I would define myself as Hindu, but I am more spiritually inclined. And so a lot of my beliefs come from that tradition. And it's a very open and all-encompassing religion and philosophy. And it really is so embedded and ingrained in me, but I wouldn't necessarily call myself a religious person in that, there's any one institution or there's a set of rituals that I necessarily follow. And that's one of the basic, ideas of the Vedic philosophy or the Hindu philosophy, is that the spirit is within each person and each thing. And having gratitude for that is so big, because something can be so big and it can be so small and it's so beautiful and so complete in and of its own right. And so I guess it's really helped me in my work because I feel like I see that and I want to connect with that on a daily basis.
That's really cool. And I think Christianity, even though there's like, the Trinity, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is essentially God within you, that part
Mhm.
of it is not generally what's emphasized because, I mean,
Sure.
historically, Christianity was really about the priests or the Pope or whoever having the connection to God and then you having to go seek it. And so I think a lot of us who grew up in Christian families, like it's a remembering that we have that within us. Cause I think that, when we get down to it, all religions say like God is within us or, whatever life force
Sure.
that
Yeah.
is. But because some doctrines more enforce the like, well, you have to read the Bible and you have to do, XYZ things. And I'm sure there are probably people who practice Hinduism in a way that also like separates from the true meaning. But I just think
Yeah.
Christianity
Mhm.
in America in particular has done that in a way that's detrimental to our connection to the higher power and that collective life force that we've been talking about.
Yeah. And to your point, when you take that relationship between you and a higher power, in my opinion, and you say that you have to insert something in the middle, I think that that inhibits us from connecting with ourselves and realizing how much confidence that you can have or how much self-respect you can have or how
Right,
complete you are
right.
in and of yourself, no matter what you believe, no matter what race you are, no matter what gender you identify as, no matter what your sexuality is, you were created and you in and of yourself are perfect, and to have
Mhm.
gratitude because you are complete. You are complete, and that spark and that life is within you, and you have the ability to heal yourself. For me it's life changing, and again I think seeing that, I mean, on a daily basis or trying to connect with that is sort of my life's purpose and what brings me happiness and joy and makes me feel just here, connected, kind of a human.
Right. Because I mean, you literally are connecting to the life force of another person and watching people heal
Yeah.
themselves, right? All you're doing is
Right.
really holding
Yeah.
the organs and saying, hey, little buddy, hey, little liver, why don't you do this?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, kind of just encouraging the whole system, just holding space, like you said, supporting, much like what you do, just in a different form, touch, just someone along the way to just kind of help you if, we need that. I was reading The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Have you read that by Stephen
Mhm.
Covey?
I haven't, but my supervisor loves it. So she'll talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's
Mhm.
just it's really interesting because in our society and in America, I was thinking about this and I was just reading that we value independence so much that, I could do this on my own. It's me against the world. Like I can do this. And it's really important to have. But at the same time, there is no way that you could do any of this by yourself. From the moment that you came into this world, you didn't birth yourself. There was, I mean,
Mhm.
every step of the way, you are being helped no matter whether you know it or not. Like you're not waking yourself up in the morning. You're truly not. You go to sleep with the faith that you wake up in the morning and you don't do it yourself. You're not breathing yourself. We don't even know how that happens yet. Like you are being breathed. We have gotten so many breaks in our life that I mean, some of them I think about, I'm like, God, like I was talking about earlier, I wouldn't be here without the clinical instructor that I had or the friends that I've
Mhm.
met along the way. And it's just so important to know that we're so interdependent and we thrive through the ability to connect. And that's the bigger picture. And, when you break it down, a lot of my work is to help connect a person to themselves and for me to connect with them because I think that it's that connection piece, that give and take that I feel like is being missed. And it's just so important. And to be there, you have to be interdependent. You have to be independent. He talks a lot about that. And I think there's codependency and there's that fight to be independent, but that balance of that interdependence is so beautiful. And I think that's so functional, and that's what changes things, I think. And so to be able to do that with your own health and to be able to then, translate it to your life and to other people, I think that's where we'll see like a bigger change or evolution. And that's what I like to kind of connect with.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where we're beginning to shift now, right? I think we've been experiencing the costs of independence and success and, this striving for more, more, more. That's why there's like so much more cancer and addiction and depression and all these things, because that's not actually in tune with the human spirit. What you're talking about is.
Sure. Right. Yeah. I think I see that every day. And as a kid, I did have a lot of pressure. I did feel a lot of cultural pressure, and that was tough. And I think, to your point, I felt like I had to be really independent, and I don't think that that was healthy for me. I know it wasn't. And I think coming full circle and realizing that it's that give and take, and through my work, and just through just realization and being older and being in the world, you realize that it's everything. It's health and it's happiness and it's joy.
Absolutely. Well, I haven't asked you the wounded healer question yet. Would you consider yourself a wounded healer?
I think for a long time, my story was that my mom died when I was younger, and my dad remarried, and it was a contentious relationship all around. I was struggling, and in my teenage years, I had just a tough time, and nothing crazy, just your average acting out and just trying to figure things out and the world
Mm.
out. And then in my 20s, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And my mom died, but it's okay. And that was really hard, and here I am, and I'm going to fight this, and I'm going to just be me. And in my 30s, I'm like, well, that was just my story, and that's what is, and here I am. So in one aspect, I would consider myself a wounded healer, but on the other hand, I think I'm just a person who's just living her life and who's had experiences and wouldn't trade any of them for anything, because I like who I am and I love who I am today. And it was all just a story. It was all a story, and it was all a part of what was, is, and what will be.
Right, right. Well, one of the things that the listeners have heard me talk about NARM so much, and I think I've talked to you a little bit about it, the neuroaffective relational model that I'm getting trained in, that's all about developmental trauma. And one of the things we talk about in NARM is identifications. Like, I could say, like, I'm an Aquarius, and so, I can't care about this because I'm an Aquarius and I'm aloof. And when we really claw into those identifications, like you said, you could have clawed into, well, I'm a kid who lost her mother, and so that's just who I am. That really gets in the way of this transcending that story and stepping into who you truly are. And it sounds like you kind of intuitively just moved that way, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's like one day I woke up, I've had a lot of help along the way, a lot of therapy, a lot of healing, if you will, a lot of help and support from amazing people. But I just remember one day being like, that's not me. This is who I am. I'm not somebody who lost their mom and has been struggling to find herself. Like, I have my own voice, and this is my story. And I think that sometimes that's hard for people around you, because I have also realized that people, I have a lot of friends who almost see me and they love me so much and they support me, but they almost see my struggle, and it's hard for them to see more than it is even for me to see, because this is my life and I don't really know much different. But in that comparison, from when I was younger, I would compare myself to other people and think, wow, it should be like this, but it's not. And well, that's all I knew. And it was hard. There was real emotions, but that really is all that I knew. And it gets confusing and it gets messy. And I was just a kid, but in realizing in my social circle that I think it gets confusing, messy for other people, and not taking that on because that's them and that's not me, has been really helpful too. So yeah, but identifying that and knowing that.
And especially in our families too, right? Because our family can project onto us a certain identification that they think we have, right? And that's part of the pressure, right? That you felt from your parents is there's this projection of, this is what Shiralee should be when she grows up, or this is how she should move through the world. And I experienced that as well. And stepping out of that identification that is that is planned for us is a challenge and can be painful. Yeah. Every time I have a guest on, most often they hear from people who listen to the show who want their services. So I'm curious if you can let people know, because PT isn't a thing that you can just show up and say, I want PT. So how do people see you if they want to see you?
Sure. So I work at Care Physical Therapy. It's in Lincoln Park at Southport and Wrightwood. in Chicago, Illinois. In order to see PT, it's a little tricky. You need a PT script from a doctor or a chiropractor or a dentist, a podiatrist.
Oh.
Yeah, we see a lot of people for various things from podiatrists. Feet need love too, but you need a script from one of those and a referral, and then call us up and make an appointment. And we do the initial assessment. It's 45 minutes to an hour, and we sort of talk about what I find and what your goals are and what our plan will be. And then we sort of take it from there. And it's obviously different for each person and what they're coming in for. So yeah, those are a few of my referral sources. And I see all ages, from baby to adults. And I work a lot with, I would say the biggest thing is chronic pain of all types: back, shoulder, neck, knees, and headaches. I see a lot of people suffering from headaches. And then I see babies and kiddos for developmental delays or issues with feeding, actually. So, yeah. So lots of different things.
Well, is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you really want listeners to know, either about you or your work?
Well, I would say that what I've learned the most in my life and what I feel like has really helped me on my healing journey is being open-minded. For a long time when I was going through my journey, I felt like Western medicine didn't really help me that much. And I was looking for answers. And I will continue to look for answers and continue to learn until the day I die. It's what gives me purpose and gives me life and joy. And what I've realized is that there's a balance and there's a need for everything. There's a need for Western-minded thinking, Eastern-minded thinking, and to truly find a balance, I think, between different ways to just care for ourselves, and that there is validity to a lot of things. And I think it's very personal. And so to honor that, to find that balance and honor what works for you. Yeah, I think that's what I'm learning and have continued to learn, that there's a place for everything.
I love it. Yep. Wise words from a wise woman.
Oh, that's funny.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I'd asked you to do this like 3 years ago. So I'm so glad. I'm so glad we did it now.
And here we are. Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you. And my first podcast.
Yay! Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here. Thanks so much to Shiralee for being our guest today. To learn more about her, you can go to our website at www.headhearttherapy.com/podcast. And thanks as always to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for amazing editing, to Liam O'Donnell for our album art, and to Ben Mueller for our theme music. Until next time, bye-bye.